Sorry about the time this morning. I don't know what happened, but my phone is where I scheduled the stream information, and I think I had an issue with the internet momentarily. Oops. So, anyway, hi. Welcome to the stream today. Let's see if I think I might have. Yeah, I smudged the camera. You can actually see everything. So, just to get started, I'm Jen, and I have been working extra this week, so I've not really had time to edit any of the things that I filmed. I've sort of been overlooking my sleep schedule, so yeah, it happens. There's just not enough hours in the day to do all the things that we want to do. I mean, have you ever been there? Of course you have. So I've got the comments over here, so I'm not like poking at the screen a bunch. There was some comments in the chat from earlier, but when I finally went into the browser version of YouTube, I was able to adjust the time back to 4, but it cleared away the chat. So unfortunately, I did get to see what you guys were talking about, because I was in a panicked haste to just get this figured out so that people didn't think I was failing on my commitment to have this stream available, because I know that some of you have been really enjoying the stream, so I want to have it available. And it's also very cathartic for me because ever since I've been working every Saturday, I can't go to my local guild. And it sucks, but those are the only days I can really work at my job at the moment. So if that's it, then that's it. So before I wanted to get into this, I wanted to talk a little bit about what it's like dealing with failures. So I started a weaving project probably in 2014, maybe 2015. I think I started in 2015, the weaving part, but I started the project idea in 2014. So I have it on a daily vlog. I'll have to find the link and post it later. And essentially what I did is this white merino, I bought loads of it. I think I had 3 fleeces totaling about 12 pounds when I was all done, which is a lot of wool. So I was spinning it for lots of different projects. Now at the time I was still occasionally doing fat fiber, which if you are familiar with the fat fiber box, then you know what I'm talking about. But fat fiber, they're still around. What they do is, if you are a fiber artist, you can contribute 50 samples for these boxes, and then you get people buying boxes. And what this allows people to do is, let's say you're new to the spinning world and you don't know anything about fiber arts, or which fiber artists really speak to your specific interests. Because, I mean, there's so many of us, and sometimes it's hard to choose until you've actually used it. And then you're like, oh, okay, I love the way so-and-so does this, or so-and-so's colors are like that. So, I was a contributor, and if you send in, I think, a minimum of 50 samples, you get a contributors box. So I wanted to see what other artists were doing and get a sense of all the various techniques that are available to fiber artists out there, so I could expand my own repertoire. And it's really important to just know how stuff is done. So I bought this box. I'm sorry, I didn't buy the box. I was given the box, and it made it with me to Korea. So in here was all of the warp yarn. Sorry about the plastic. This is all the warp yarn that I had for my weaving fail. And I spun all of this during the 2014 Winter Olympics. And I remember that because I watched a lot of the figure skating stuff, and based on the timeline, it had to be that particular Olympics because I was in Korea and I was watching the Olympics while I was making this yarn. So it's sort of like I was spinning memories at this time. So, you know, it's one of those things, if you're a crafter, you know immediately what I'm talking about. So this was comprised from a lot of those other fiber artists in that box. But I also had some bits left over from other projects. So I used this as the warp. And then I had this epic amount of yarn. So this is so much white yarn. And I used this as the weft. But because I was still new to weaving, I made a very silly mistake and I beat the weft too firmly. And so when I was done, you couldn't actually see any of these lovely colors underneath. It was just being hidden totally by all this sea of white. I didn't like it. It was really stiff. It didn't have that nice drape I was going for. And so I was at a conundrum because for a blog post, I timed myself to see how long it would take me to spin this yarn. And it took me 67 hours to spin it. That's a lot of time to just throw away. And I feel like this movement towards positivity, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, yes, I think positivity is really good and that we should be staying positive through all of the things, even the bad stuff, even the stuff that kind of makes us sad or angry. So this kind of infuriated me because I then had to think, well, what do I do with that? I don't want to wear it. I don't want to throw it away. I need to get the yarn back. How do I get the yarn back? And so I started the tedious process of unpicking the warp out of the weft. So the warp are the threads that go up and down, and the wefts are the ones that zigzag across. And I figured, based on that, it should be easier to remove the warp threads, because that's just one straight line, than it would be to unpick one weft pick each time. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. So I started unpicking it practically immediately after finishing, so that must have been 2015 when I did that. And it sat in storage for well, since about 2015, so September 2015 when I came here. And so I had been occasionally unpicking it for probably 3 or 4 months. And then I put it in storage and I felt really defeated by the whole project. And then when I was visiting my mom in March of 2020, I decided, well, I should probably get back to this project. And I wasn't going to do any filming. I just wanted to get it over with. But ever since I've recently launched a Patreon to kind of help with doing this more full-time if I can. So I do have a part-time job, but I spend a lot of time making content and editing it, and now that I'm done with school I actually have a lot more time to get it done, but I'm sort of restricted with my hours in the UK because I'm still here on a student visa, and so it causes a lot of complications. If you want to do something in life, it often makes you take a meandering journey to get there. So, yeah. I thought it'd be fun to post some updates on Patreon to get me to check in with the project regularly, a bit like the live streams that I've been doing here. Just because I'm a bit ashamed of this failure, even though I know I shouldn't be, but I think it comes down to this positive mentality that I need to be progressing, I need to be moving forward, I need to be productive, and then if I'm not productive, then I should, not necessarily should feel bad, but I think that is sort of the trade-off with all of this positivity that has been promoted in the last maybe 5 or 8 years. So I think a lot of people during the pandemic, being locked inside, understood that being productive sometimes is just sitting on your butt doing absolutely nothing. So yeah, we definitely do learn from failures, and it is pretty much just a setback, like you were saying, Crystal. So if you want to see more about that project, I'm going to be posting it there just because it'll help me keep things slightly more organized, I think. I was considering putting it on the blog, but I think I want the blog to be more of like education and updates, so I don't want to lock that behind a Patreon paywall. And for things like this, it's sort of like, it can be more of a community project, and so I want to maybe get some advice and have people weigh in on stuff, and I think that's a good place to keep all that information. I don't know how to do Discord. There are a lot of YouTubers, fiber arts YouTubers, who have been creating Discords for their fans. So it's like fans of particular creators can get together and talk about pretty much anything, but also they get an opportunity to talk directly with their favorite fiber artist or YouTube creator. So yeah, for those of you who know me, I've had free content available on my channel since 2012, and I don't like the idea of putting any education behind a paywall if I can avoid it, just because I'd rather have more people to work with than fewer people, if that makes sense. So anyway, with that out of the way, I wanted to get back to this project because I've literally had no other time this week, and I wanted to just sit down and get on with it because, in part, this is the same yarn that I'm spinning here. It's actually, kind of frustratingly, a slightly different gauge. So this is a little thinner than the gauge I've been spinning for my sweater. So this is what's needed for my project. And this is probably about a 1 whole gauge size difference. Because I was thinking there might be enough here to substitute for this sweater project, and then I wouldn't have to make this. Did I hear coffee?
Yes.
There's a coffee coming. Yay! Thank you. Chris, if you need to refresh, that might help if your screen is frozen. If you can still hear me, your screen might just be frozen. That's very true. It's okay to be a human being instead of a human doing. Yeah, I haven't swatched this because this yarn was literally just reclaimed, and it still actually has a little bit of the crimp from while it was still woven. Can you let me know if you can hear the wind and the rain outside, because we're still suffering from Storm Eunice, and we live in a house with old windows, so just let me know if it's really loud. I'll try to move the camera closer. So I'm guessing this is probably about a fingering weight yarn. possibly a lace weight yarn. I haven't actually weighed it against the yardage. So one of the things that I wanted to do was put a competition in my Patreon for the person who can guess the closest yardage to this will win a prize. But I haven't had time to make the prize for that, so I've just kind of been sitting here delaying. But there's quite a lot of yardage, and if I say there's probably about enough for a sweater, that might give it away a little bit. But yeah, I'm just basing it on the way that it looks, and I haven't set this yet because I was going to dye it and then set it. Well, through the dyeing process, the yarn would set because it would be wetted, and then when I hang it up to dry, it'll be all ready to start knitting. But this was also a traditional 3-ply, whereas the other one was a chain ply, and you can actually tell the difference even with merino. So unfortunately I can't mix and match these yarns for a sweater. Maybe I just need to be more creative. If anyone has a way of like figuring out a sweater that gives you an approximate yardage consumed given a gauge, because that's one of the things that holds me up when I'm thinking about making a sweater, because commercial sweaters, you know, you just buy an extra ball of yarn, no big deal. But if you're making the yarn, well, making an extra skein of yarn is more of a big deal than just buying one. So yeah, if you have a way of calculating the amount of yardage you would use if you had a swatch to go by, that would be really helpful, because then I could weigh the swatch, determine how much yardage went into the swatch, and then I could use that when calculating for a sweater, because I would have a sense of the finished dimensions. Anyway, if that makes sense to you, and you know of a resource that has that, then let me know, or post in the comments below. This is just actually the regular flyer on the minstrel. I want to get a jumbo. So about 3 years ago, a fan emailed me to say, hey, why don't you ask Kromsky if they're interested in having you do reviews, because I talk about my reel a ton, and I'm a huge fan of it, because I can make literally any yarn I want with it. I'm basically limited to how many yarns I can fit onto here, so I really like big skeins of yarn. So I do want to get a bulky flyer attachment for this at some point, but I've mainly been unable to, just because cost of shipping was really high when I was living in Korea, and there were no Kromsky suppliers in Korea. So I was going to do it when I was back in the States, but I was trying to save all my money so that I could come to the UK, and then while I was here I was focusing on school, so I didn't really have the ability to do that. So this person said, well, why not just see if they are willing to send you something for review? And so I was in the middle of doing that, and then I think the email chain kind of fettered off. So I should probably get back to that, because I would love to see how much I like it, because the bulky flyer attachment to my Ashford Traditional I like more than their original flyer, but it may not always work that way, so I might actually prefer spinning on this one unless I'm going to make a special type of yarn, or if I want to make a thicker yarn so that I can make bigger skeins with the bulky flyer. So we'll see how that goes. But as far as everything with this wheel, it just came like this as a standard model, so there hasn't been any alterations to it yet. Okay, so Wanda's asked, can anyone recommend a really good chart of equivalence for all the fiber yarn measurements? Does that mean like yarn gauge specifically you're talking about? So this flyer should hold about 4 ounces, and this is probably, I'd say, about 2.5 ounces. So when you first start and it builds up, it doesn't seem like it's well, it seems like it's getting big really quickly, so you think you're making serious progress on building it up, but it's one of those things where, because the yarn is going around a larger circumference, it will take on probably another 1.5 ounces, even though it looks pretty full already. So you can kind of see on there, maybe. So they should hold 4 ounces. I have managed to hold 4 ounces of plied yarn. So if you're plying yarn, because a plied yarn tends to bloom more so than the single of the same yarn, you usually end up losing capacity just because the plied yarn is a bit fluffier. But oh gosh, now it's hailing. Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh, everything is going like horizontally out the window. Can you hear that? This is crazy. I don't know if you can really see that. Can you see that? Dang. Oh my goodness. So we're in the East Midlands, and because we're more centrally located, it's way worse on the coast. So we saw some images of buildings that had sort of like the roofs just torn off, like tearing a piece of paper, basically. We're supposed to have friends coming over in a few hours because we're going to play a session of D&D. And I said, you know, if you're okay to drive in this weather, that's fine. If not, like, no big deal. So, because Britain is usually a really wet country, it's a maritime climate, it gets wet on a pretty regular basis, although we had sort of a dry January and most of February. So we're prone to flooding all the time. So the water doesn't have anywhere to go because the ground is already wet from the last rain that we had. So that was sorry for Mother Nature's insistence on being recognized just then. Oh my goodness. It's calmed down now. Oh goodness. Yeah, so here is, to go back to what Chris was saying, that there are 3 different types of bobbins, and you're probably right. I think I just had the standard ones. The coffee was amazing, by the way.
Would you like another one?
Sure. Make sure that she doesn't come in here.
Where's your cup?
Oh.
Sorry.
Thank you. It's really nice having a live-in barista. Yeah, so this is the standard roll that came with my wheel. And then this one, I was saying, has probably about 2.5 ounces of wool on there. And so if I tip it like this, you can kind of see it looks like it's taken up quite a lot of space already, but I know that I could probably pack on almost another 2 ounces to this bobbin, and I'm going off of what I know I've carded up for this project. So I'm doing the minimum I really think I need. So I want to have at least 1,200 yards when I'm finished with this spinning. And I'm pretty much aiming for about 1,300 yards. Mainly because I've already checked the notes of the pattern and I know my own measurements because another project I want to get back to is making a corset. Because I've been watching all these other famous YouTubers with their corset projects, and I want to make one too. So, yeah, like, just... I have a lot of stuff I want to be doing. Just haven't had a lot of time. But I'm just going for the bare minimum of yarn that I need for the project, because I don't spend a lot of time making stuff for myself. I pretty much make stuff when I need it. And so 2022 is meant to help me obtain that. So given that I'm already struggling with this white stuff, I'm just going to have enough yarn for a swatch for the sweater project, and if I do need anything extra, I can sort of steal it from my swatch, but I already know about how much I'm going to need, so I just need to make sure that I spin enough right now for it. So it's really annoying. If you've been in this position where you just kind of want to get on with doing the knitting, you know where I am. Oh my goodness. I've had so many distractions. I really hope this gauge turns out okay. Anyway, and speaking of knitting projects, so I recently posted to my blog where I give a few little tips about dyeing. So if you aren't familiar with dyeing, there is a lot of information out there, and to get into dyeing, you have to consume a lot, which means the amount that you can pick up is going to sort of be like some here, some there. So at least I've put a couple of tips out on dyeing. So I've got the video on using watercolors to help you understand how to dye. That's a really good one. And then I've put this, well, it's a main post and then an addendum post that I've put on afterwards, where I sort of talk about how to do this stepped process of dyeing, because during the last live stream where I was making this yarn, I was talking about this. Maybe it was the live stream? I think I mentioned it during the live stream. I also think I may have talked about it during the Fiber Arts community video with Evie from Jillian Eve. Because one of the barriers of getting into dyeing is kind of being scared to mess stuff up or not knowing really what to do, and it feels like you're kind of going feet first into everything. And so I wanted to kind of elaborate on some of the things that I said by actually just posting some pictures and giving some guidelines for how to achieve these effects. And so you don't always have to think about dyeing as sort of all in one go. You can sort of play around with stuff. And so the addendum that I posted sort of described what can you do in the same dye container, where you can have the same values of colors, but one skein you might do more blended and the other skeins might be less blended. So I've got this project here. This is the, it's like Malabrigo, it's really soft spun merino. So I let the colors just sit wherever I put them, and you can see just how the variation is more pronounced. But then I also have this skein here, which is technically the same dye lot because I dyed it at the same exact time, in the same exact dye bath. But I moved the colors around more before they were allowed to set, so you actually get more subtler transitions, whereas this one is more punctuated. Ooh. And I haven't just made something for myself and let's see here. I did the cardigan about this time last year. So I pretty much make one thing for myself once a year. Otherwise, I'm just spinning up skeins of yarn for videos, or I'm making skeins of yarn to just put into my stash for an eternity, or I'm just making stuff for friends and family. So I wanted something for myself because 2022 is about just making projects because I want to do them. I found this really easy pattern on Ravelry, which it's got like a textured knit. So it's a typical triangular shawl. I don't know if you can really see the texture in it, but basically there's stockinette, and then in this sort of section here, it's a knit to, purl to, but it shifts every about 3 or 4. One, two, three. Every 3 stitches, it shifts by 1. So you have this knit to, purl to rib that shifts every 3 stitches. And you're also doing the central increases and the increases on the side. So, what is it called? Passe-partout. It's a free pattern on Ravelry. I know I should be spending money on patterns because I know it helps a lot of designers, but sometimes I get really indecisive if I'm looking to buy something, and it keeps me from actually making anything. There's so many patterns to choose from. But I get paralyzed by choice, and then I end up walking away after spending like 2 hours looking for something to knit, and then I just don't knit anything because I haven't decided on what I want to knit. It's part of the reason why I'm always begging for suggestions from others. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, so Richard is a very nice man. He's got some really nice coffee gear, which they use professionally at the shop he works at. So it's nice being able to get barista quality stuff with barista professional gear at home. So I just wanted to go back to a question that was asked. Oh, Joy said that she made a corset stays a couple years ago. For those who don't know, there's a difference between a corset and stays. Yeah, it is a very tedious project. I think for me, it was getting it to fit my longer torso. So that involves a little bit, because I don't have a French curve, it involves a little bit of eyeballing the right curvature and then doing the mock-up and testing it against the body to make sure that you get that really nice curvy line the way that corsets are supposed to give you. So you can be whatever shape underneath, you know, just as long as the corset has the right shape, then you'll look great and everything. But the one that I'm using is a modern corset. But because I live in Leicester, there's Symington's corsets, which Bernadette Banner has talked a lot about on her channel. And I've got a colleague who's an archaeologist. She's also in the process of making some corsets. And so we've been talking back and forth. So maybe after I finish this modern version and kind of get my feet wet, then I can maybe make something that's more authentic. Thank you. Ta-da! So this is a really nice fruity coffee that we get from a local shop in town. They do all the roasting on site. What's really cool is in 2017, we had a coffee from one farm in it was a cafe in Seoul, and that particular cafe had a barista that won the Korean Barista Championships, which is very prestigious if you're into that sort of thing. So we had the coffee there, and it was the coffee that they won with. Then the same roaster in Leicester bought something from that farm. And so we were actually able to taste the differences in how different roasters will take the same coffee from the same farm and kind of pull out different flavors through the roasting process. So that's actually kind of interesting. It would be like if spinner in the UK and a spinner in the US were each given half of the same fleece. So like right down the middle, one spinner gets one half and the other spinner gets the other half. And then you got to see how each spinner interpreted the qualities of that particular fleece and then spun it to see what the results would be like. That would be so interesting. Do you think it'd be interesting to watch? I don't know. So maybe I will do more sewing projects if people want me to ramble on about that stuff, because from a textile production perspective, because that's what I did for my PhD, it is kind of helpful to know what people are doing with the finished cloth, right? Because in the Iron Age, people were probably not doing too much tailoring, but if you think about how long it takes to make yardage by hand and then to weave it into cloth, and how much yardage of cloth you end up producing and all that stuff, and then here you are watching people cut out pieces of fabric over and over and over again, and I'm just I feel sweat drops coming down. It's like, oh, that'd be so nerve-wracking for me if that was something that I spun and wove myself. But yeah, there was I keep missing this one question that was asked. So Chris has a question. Oh no. So everyone makes silly little mistakes where we think we're buying something that we need and we end up not needing it. You may just need to get a jumbo flyer to go with your jumbo bobbins. Or find some friends and do like an exchange. You know, someone who's like, I need some more big bobbins for my Kromsky minstrel, and maybe, you know, you can get some fiber in exchange or some bobbins in exchange. You never know. Crystal is advising me to go over the bare minimum with my yardage. I'm very stubborn. I should, just because it would, because I'm going to over dye this, which is part of the reason why I was describing my last two blog posts about dyeing. I should. The knitting pattern is very subtle, and I really like it because of that. I don't like endless amounts of stockinette, but sometimes I just need something that is pretty monotonous, because at the end of the day, I'm too tired to do anything but just sit on the couch. Oh, that's a good point, Crystal. So I was talking about the pattern being free, and I have most of my patterns are free. I only have one that is a purchasable pattern. But seeing how they're written really does matter. If it's if it's too complicated to follow based on just the way that it's written, if you're going to purchase the pattern, it might be really frustrating. And if they don't have a consistent online presence, that's another thing that kind of worries me. If I can't go and ask anybody about these kinds of questions, we have a local knitting shop here, but I sort of understand like that particular issue, wanting to sort of see how a designer writes their pattern before purchasing. I have sometimes just purchased without considering that before, but if you want to explore more about a particular designer, I guess that's a really good idea. Oh yes, this coffee is very good, and it is very very convenient to be given the coffee. I don't even have to give up. Sorry, we've been all over the place with this live stream. Hopefully you guys are getting some crafting done, and I am too, I guess. It's I should probably think more about my setup next time, because it would probably be more convenient to have my laptop over here so I can see questions rather than behind me. Oh yeah, okay, so Joy pointed out that 1770 stays are a little bit easier because there's less to do with the curvature than those later ones. So that's a good point. And I think actually, Morgan Donner has a video on when she made some stays. Well, at least she does. I know that she does because I'm pretty sure I remember her crafting room. Wouldn't it be nice to have a crafting room? This is sort of like the multi-purpose crafting corner for me. Oh man. That's exactly right, Joy. Having an awareness of the end use is very important for the starting process. So I argued this quite a lot in my thesis because the way textile production has often been discussed, it sort of comes off as, oh well, it's simple, you just have wool and then you make this stuff. But there's a lot of material engagement that goes on with that process, and if you're a spinner or a weaver, you have to have some awareness of the processes which follow whatever it is that you're working on, so that you end up with a finished product that works. So let's say if you're a spinner and the weaver is someone else, if you spin a yarn that looks beautiful but just will not be suitable for the warp-weighted loom, all your threads are going to break as soon as the weaver gets underway. And that's incredibly frustrating because basically you have ruined all of that wool and the yarn is completely unusable for that purpose. And so you basically get sent back to start. So that's sort of where communication between the divisions in modes of production is really important. And so you can't just assume that any spinner would know that. It's contingent upon what the final project is. So that's a very important point to raise. Ooh, this bit of the wool did not get carded as nicely as the rest of it. Oh man. I was a bit in a rush. I just needed something to spin for the first live stream that I did with this yarn. I just needed to get enough so that I could finish the yardage for the project. And so that section right there was not fun to spin. I have never steeked a sweater. I've seen people do it. I've heard a lot of advice from people who have made sweaters that require steeking. And every single time I read it, I literally detect the fear in everyone's writing. When they're like, I'm going to start doing this. Wish me luck. Gosh, I don't know. I would probably be less freaked out if I was using commercially spun yarn. But if I had to do that to my hand spun, I don't know. I think I would need some moral support. So, about these amigurumi projects, I've often seen them crocheted. Are you crocheting yours or are you knitting them, Joy? An owl mitten. So many interesting projects you guys are working on. Do you find that you kind of alternate between spinning and knitting, or is it sort of like I spin and then I knit, or do you spin a lot and then stop and knit more? Because I'm definitely the kind of person where I just spin and spin and spin and then stop to knit something because I have to knit it. Yeah, Chris, so whenever you are knitting, it seems to follow that the direction that we spin and ply, and how most commercial yarns are spun and plied. So singles are clockwise, which is these spun, and then plied S direction, which is the counterclockwise direction. But when you're crocheting, what happens is, I guess the nature of the way that you make the stitches, it causes them to untwist slightly. And so what happens is, with commercial yarns anyway, because they tend to have a low twist, low ply, especially for the thinner gauge yarns, they result in sort of like this loose look. In the last, I don't have the sample with me right now, but the last video I did with the supported spindling tutorial, that was a crocheted sample with my overspun 2-ply. So for all intents and purposes, it would have functioned more like an S spun Z plied yarn, if that makes, hopefully that makes sense. Joy, you might have to share some more of your sticking examples. Like, what have you done to overcome the fear of ruining a project whenever you're sticking? For those of you who don't know what sticking is, maybe in the comments someone will mention this as well, but from what I know is you knit your sweater blank, and then you can like cut out the spots for the arms, and if you want to make it a cardigan, you can cut it open, but the reason why you do it this way is so that, clearly I don't know a whole lot about this, but from what I understood, it was something like it's better to knit it this way so that it doesn't ruin the pattern, and then you just cut where you need to make those insertions. I had to buy a new pair of needles for this knitting project. I have 2 pairs of US size 8 circular needles with the 29-inch extension between them. And because I don't often work multiple knitting projects at the same time, I have no idea where I have squirreled them away to. And it's really uncharacteristic of me because I always know where I end up putting this stuff. But I'm pretty sure a size 8 needle is what I'm going to need for my sweater project. So do you have multiple needles, I'm assuming? When I was back in the States, my summer before coming here, I decided I wanted to start crocheting a granny square blanket. I get cramps really easily in my hands from crocheting. Is there any way to avoid that? Because that's sort of my main issue with crochet is I can't do it for very long because I get really bad cramps. Like, this is the hand that I use to hold the yarn, and then I crochet with my right hand. And I used to get really bad cramps in my hands from knitting until I switched to circular needles, which I pretty much now use for everything. Oh. So 73 Margaret? That's my mom's name. Feels weird saying my mom's name, even though you're not my mom. Suzanne Bryan's channel has a very comprehensive guide to steeking. So that's good. That's got some good information then. Thank you for sharing. What else? A wristlet. Oh yeah, that's a brilliant idea. If you are interested in steeking, just make a sample. Of course. So, I had to work a 10-hour shift yesterday. We had 2 normal chocolate workshops, and then we had a hen party workshop after that. So I didn't get home until about 7:30. I worked all day. And then my brain was like incapable of turning off last night, so I didn't get as restful night of sleep as I wanted. So I ended up sleeping for 2 hours this afternoon. So I've not been awake for very long. I basically woke up at 3 and I was like, time to set up for the stream. Of course, sampling helps everything. And taking notes while you're sampling as well. Yeah, Joe, I bet you do have a lot of needles. It sounds like you're doing quite a few projects. What was the sweater that you were sweater yarn you were finishing set for, out of curiosity? I didn't have very many knitting needles, and someone very helpfully on Ravelry helped me get basically 1 set of circulars and 1 set of double pointed needles for every gauge at a discount, because the shop that she worked at you could get a discount if you bought a bunch of needles in bulk, which I didn't know. I don't think all knitting shops will do that, but her knitting shop did. So I have all of my knitting needles still in their original containers. So when I'm done, I put them back, and they're all filed according to size. So I have all the small ones in the front of my knitting bag, and all the larger ones in the back of my knitting bag. I don't have, so it's really difficult for me to search for something that I've lost. So everything has a home, and if it doesn't go back to its home, I get really inconsolable and a little bit panicked because I need to just have the thing. And if I can't find the thing, I have no idea where to start looking. And it will sometimes just take me hours to find something, and it's usually not time I typically have. So I have to put everything back exactly where it's supposed to go to save my sanity. Oh, can you guys hear Layla? She's doing her cat thing. She's such a pain. So if I were to let her in here, she would just make a big mess. She'd get into everything, make a lot of noise. Unfortunately. Well, Joy, when you settle on a knitting pattern, let us know. Because I'm hoping that with me doing this project, other people are going to pick up some sweater projects as well. Oh, so in the comments, in the chat, someone was asking how to hold the hook. So when I hold the hook, I hold it upright, so the hook part is at the top. So I guess I scoop with the hook, if that makes sense. So if this hand is holding the yarn while I'm crocheting, then this hand is doing all this stuff. So maybe how I'm holding the crochet hook matters. So a family member taught me how to do this. Well, I first learned how to crochet when I was about 3 or 4 from my great-grandmother. She made those like pretty stereotypical grandmother doilies. And I honestly have no idea whatever happened. She had this wonderful set of crochet hooks, but I have no idea what happened to all of them when she passed away. But I was then sort of given a refresher back in 2015 when I wanted to do this granny square blanket. And the person who taught me learned from an older person. So it was a family member's mother-in-law, and she was part of the same generation my great-grandmother was. So she did it with the scoop style, with the crochet hook. So I honestly, I don't watch many other tutorials on crochet, so I didn't really consider that it was just the way that I was holding these things that mattered. I thought, because some people who have arthritis, they'll have those crochet hooks with a thicker handle, because that, I guess, helps with arthritis in the hand. But maybe I should look into this whenever I'm doing my samples. Because then I might actually make bigger samples than the teeny tiny ones that I've done so far. Um, so Nifty Thrifty Bits, you've been around on the channel for a very long time. I appreciate that. I am going to be doing a lot more spindle videos. In fact, I got an update this morning. So I was talking about this, I think, during the last live stream. There's a lady, I made some cute little scarves for her hand-carved ducks. And she went into her workshop this morning. She said, I woke up this morning thinking about spindles. Which is, you know, lovely to hear. Especially given how dead I was when I woke up this morning. So, she's going to make some prototypes. And I'm going to be featuring them on the channel and making them available for purchase after I've done all of my sort of spinning trials with them to make sure that they will work well. So I'm really excited about that. But I did mention in my supported spindle video, maybe I did, maybe I said this, maybe I didn't. But the yarn that I'm making on my supported spindle right now, I'm hoping I'll actually have enough yardage when I'm done for a sweater. So I'm doing it intermittently with this one because the supported spindle is making yarn faster. It's going to be a thicker gauge than this one. And it's only going to be a 2-ply, so I have to spin just a little bit less. So I'm hoping I'll be able to post more progress with that video. Sorry, I'll post more progress with that project, probably in a video. So Joy is finishing Smoky Graphite, which is a crew neck sweater by Marley Bird. It's been very easy. I like the word easy. I suppose another thing that you could do, well, I could do maybe if I got really bored with this and ended up not having enough yardage, could just spin more dye at a different color and make sort of like a color work thing. My very first, I've only done it once. I made a pair of sort of swirly mittens. It was like a swirly pattern mitten with my Ryland because I had been wanting to do Fair Isle or color work for a really long time. I just never actually got around to doing it. But I was tired of always making a pair of mittens because the ones I was wearing would just fall apart. And I'm coming up on the end of my second season wearing these mittens, and they have held up so well. There's a few sort of like areas that have been pilled, and some of the pattern kind of like right around here on the hand. That's where I grip the handlebars. This part is starting to look a little felted on the surface, but otherwise the Ryland has been really soft to wear, but extremely hard wearing. So I'm very happy with those mittens. But yeah, if I quit this project early and I end up not having enough yardage, I guess I can always consider a colorwork sweater option. Because I like the idea of contrasting cuffs and things, so you never know. Chris, you're not crazy for wanting to dye yarn. I do it basically just to get the exact thing that I want. Not to say that other people are incapable of doing that, but sometimes it's just a matter of, I feel like because I've dyed it, I'm more likely to complete the project, and especially if it's something where I'm wearing it, I get extremely particular. If I'm giving it away, I'm not quite as particular, or if I'm selling it, I'm not quite as particular. But if it's me, like, I don't know. I think maybe I'm just hard to please. But it's like, I'm hard to please myself. Like, I guess I give myself really, really high standards, and so I get it's just, everyone's got a quirk. I have very personal high standards. I want it this way, and that's it. Okay, Crystal has spun and knitted a plus size sweater within 3 months with just drop spindles. That's actually really, really quick. But because I haven't done any sweaters or large projects with spindles as the tool, I can't offer those gauges. Yeah, so I'm hoping with these new spindles, I'll be able to do more projects with them. It took me much longer with the supported spindle to feel comfortable enough to make consistent skeins of yarn with it than I experienced with the wheel. But I do have, I think I have a couple of skeins of supported spun yarn that are around 200 or 250 yards, which should be enough for like a scarf or something. Should do more projects with that yarn, because the way that I spin those yarns with the supported spindle, they do look different compared to a traditionally spun and plied yarn. So like this one, for example, it's very pronounced. You might be able to see. Here, let me pull out a strand. I don't know if you can really see that, but it's spun and plied very tightly. So this will actually look more pronounced in the finished product, but with supported spinning, the yarn just looks really soft. In fact, I took some pictures for my blog about a month ago, and my camera was panicking over trying to like focus on it because it's really soft and fuzzy on the surface, so it didn't know what to focus on, so it was really frustrating. So I think all of the horrible hail and rain has stopped for now, so that's good. There's a lot of road construction at the end of my block. I'm hoping it doesn't cause delays because it's the main thoroughfare I take in order to get to and from work. So I've been having to cycle a different route. And speaking of which, on Friday when I had to go to work, I had to cycle in, I actually don't remember what the gusts were up to, but it was sort of like 40-mile-an-hour winds. that I was cycling to and from work on Friday in. It's saying something when you're cycling downhill and you pretty much just come to a standstill stop because of the wind. Okay, yeah, so I guess you could see that on camera. It's really tough to see because I'm using my phone for the stream, and so you can't really see in higher resolution. You could probably see it on the a bigger screen. But yeah, this has been quite a ramble. Hopefully you guys got some craft time in today. I wish I had more fun stuff to share. I haven't really had a lot of time to work on stuff for the shop. I do have a few yarns, so I've got these two colors to put in the shop. This one, these are a merino silk blend, and then I've got a couple of superwash. So these are merino superwash. It's actually kind of cool to see. These all were dyed in an exact same dye bath, but because this is a blend, it didn't come out quite as strongly as the superwash. Maybe you can see that. See if I turn them all the right way. Yeah. This is the merino silk, and then these are the superwash. So I've got loads of wool that I need to card up and list in the shop, because I have quite a lot over here that I need to work through, and it's better to get that all available in time for spring, when basically all fiber artists experience a sudden jump in sales. Everyone has pretty much gotten their fill of wool by the time January and February occur, so sales are always down. But I'm hoping that next week I'll be able to get to some of the stuff that I've been asking myself to do. New blog posts weekly, new video weekly, at least something put into the shop weekly. These live streams are really nice, so I've been considering doing them weekly. Just depends. If you guys like them, let me know. Whenever you're spinning, especially if you're being distracted with other things, just check your gauge every once in a while. I do not want to have to respin any of this because I got the gauge wrong. And it's true, I have not spun this since the last live stream, so these have been really useful for me. I think so. I don't have a diagnosed case of ADHD, but I think I might suffer from it. Just thinking about my experience growing up and what my childhood was like, and then me as an adult, I have to multitask. So like the other night, even though I was dead exhausted, I was knitting, I was watching my partner play a video game, and I was playing a phone game at the same time. And I was, sort of aware of everything at the same time. When I was doing my PhD, sometimes I would have like a 60-hour work week where I was researching, I was writing, I was doing conference papers, I was doing volunteer work, and occasionally, like for the first half of my PhD, I worked. So, I don't know how I managed all that. Like, I think it was 2018. I did 6 conferences in 1 year, which is actually about one conference every other month. And in 2020, 2021, I did 10 conferences. I did 9 conferences, plus I co-organized 2 other conferences, and then I did a session for another conference. So that was like 12 conferences in a year. And I pulled that all off while finishing up my thesis and preparing myself for the Viva, and also doing all of my corrections that I had afterwards. So I'm pretty sure that part of the reason why I love crafting so much and I find it very therapeutic is because it holds my interest. And for children who do suffer from ADHD, they require a lot of intense focus in order to feel calm, because when they're actively engaged with stuff, they get that release of dopamine, and they need a higher amount of dopamine than a neurotypical child. And so I'm pretty sure this is why I was difficult when I was little, because I had so many toys, I had so many like creative projects, and I was constantly doing like, in an evening, I remember I would do like 5 or 6 different things just in about 4 hours. And I would always read before bed, so I could calm my brain down. And then when I was in high school, it got worse because I knew I wanted to get smart and pursue a PhD. So, like for example, my junior year of high school, I had an early bird class. I was there before school opened, and it was, what class was it? I think it was trigonometry. So I took that math class first thing in the morning, and then I had my normal day, and I took 2 science classes. So I took advanced biology and advanced chemistry the same year. And I also worked 20 hours a week in addition to all that stuff. And I ended up graduating from high school early, so I had to front load all of my requirements, which were, I had the requirements for graduating high school where I was located required more than the state minimum requirement, so I ended up taking more high school credit hours in 3.5 years than what was usually expected to do. I was expected to do in 4 years. So as long as I'm able to pay attention to what I'm talking about, then the yarn part is really easy. It's just stopping and going back to check. That's where I think my gauge might get off a little bit. Hi Charlotte, did you have a question about calculations? I don't know if your comment got cut off or something. I'm glad you guys enjoyed these live streams. I was kind of on the fence initially about doing them with any kind of regularity. I thought if I did the ones with the warp weighted loom, people would be interested, just because it's kind of an unusual tool. Like, there aren't that many YouTubers that have a warp weighted loom, and I'm mainly focusing on the practical use of using a loom, so I don't feel like I'm in a state to really do a tutorial how to use a warp weighted loom. I'm just describing what my experiments are and how I am pursuing them with the loom. So given that those were they got a fair number of views. So I thought, okay, well maybe if I use these live streams as a way to also check in on my New Year's resolutions, then maybe I can provide some space for others. And I also recognize that some people don't have a local spinning and weaving guild, so these are really important for them as well. It's all about building community. I feel like I know you guys more now than I did before. And it's in part because I have this opportunity to read the chat and ramble back and forth to you, whereas with YouTube videos, normally I post something and then I respond back to comments, which is, it's slightly less of an organic conversation than these live streams can be. Well, yeah, I think the other thing about live streams is just the opportunity to hear what other people are up to. Not always craft related, so I've watched a couple of Evie's live streams now, and it's true. Interesting stuff gets said kind of offhandedly because the topics aren't quite so concrete. So later this evening, I'm the dungeon master for our D&D group, and it's a homebrew that I did. Oh gosh, I think I initially started it in 2016 with my partner, and it's grown to have a couple of extra players, and I guess I would describe it as sort of, they're now into the third act, so they're dealing with the major conflict in the world. So the decisions that they have made up to this point really impact the trajectory of the storyline. And as someone who has done I did a lot of storytelling when I was little. I forgot to oil my wheel when we started. I can feel the resistance from the wheel, and it's because it was dried out. Goodness. I did a lot of storytelling when I was little, in part because I was an only child and I didn't really have many outlets, so I just invented a bunch of stuff. So it kind of makes sense that I would do joint storytelling with other adults through D&D. And so, it's easy for me to understand how joint storytelling works. It's less easy for people who didn't necessarily grow up the same way I did. So my landlord, I was talking to him about something completely unrelated, and I mentioned D&D, and he's like, Dungeons and Dragons? You mean like that paper game? And so I was describing to him that it's basically joint storytelling where you have sort of like the author at the table giving you the circumstances of the world, like things that can happen, things that are unlikely to happen. And with these player characters, your friends or whoever sitting at the table kind of opposite you, they're the ones who are kind of taking these prompts and working with them narratively and using dice rolls to kind of influence the direction. Well, do you succeed? Do you sort of succeed? Or is it like a total failure? Or, how do you handle the situation? And so it's not like writing a novel, because it's organically generated and there are multiple authors, because it's not just me coordinating everything. It's kind of like I'm the final authority on certain aspects, but I don't control the players. So they are free to interpret the situation however their character would do so. And so it's difficult for people who have never been exposed to this type of just totally organic storytelling. And so that's one of the things that I do when I'm not busy crafting, or sometimes I've actually, when I've been a player, I've sat down with my wheel at the gaming table and I've spun yarn while listening to this story play out and making my rolls with my left hand. Yeah, I think if you were to sit down and watch a game of D&D, it would be a little bit bewildering, just because there's a lot of knowledge about races and rules of engagement and social interactions that kind of dispel some of these questions. But if you want to watch real professionals, I highly recommend watching Critical Role, because they're professional voice actors, and the DM, Matt Mercer, has been doing this stuff for way longer than I have. And so he's kind of got this perfect storytelling persona, and the rules are obviously there, but just because they're a bunch of, highly imaginative people and they have been exposed to lots of different stories through their voiceover work, they are able to adapt to the situations because they've all got improv training, which is essentially one of the things that D&D teaches you is sort of like improvisational skills. You take what someone else has said and then you sort of add your bit to this collective narrative. And they're very good at it. And so if you want to know more about D&D and sort of the narrative aspects I'm talking about, rather than just the rules-based stuff, then watch Critical Role. It's ROLE. So Layla's taken to body slamming the door. Hopefully you don't hear that. Oh, that's cool, Joy. Joy's husband learned to write novels through being a DM for many years. I have considered something like this. So, fun fact, because I've been keeping track of all of my player notes, so I have like all of the stories, stuff that they know, stuff that they don't know. I've kept track of it for the last 5 years. And I keep putting it into a master document, which is their entire campaign. And it's 77,000 words. Yeah. So my PhD was 80,000. And I wrote it over about the same amount of time. Yeah, I didn't do a ton of theater, but when I was little, I was a figure skater. So I figure skated for 14 years. I started when I was 2 and I quit when I was 16. And every spring we would do an ice show. So it was usually 4 segments. So we'd do 2 segments and then we do like a halftime break. And then we do 2 more sections. And it was all based on things like musicals, stuff from Disney, anything that had really good music. My very first one that I was in, it was 1988 when I was 4. And I was a munchkin from The Wizard of Oz because, I was little. And I had like a little blue tunic and a little blue hat with a flower on it. And that was the first exposure I had to musicals, really. And then because my grandmother, she watched a lot of movies as well. I was exposed to so much music, so many old musicals, like stuff from the 50s and 60s, which I guess at the time it wasn't that old. Now thinking about musicals from the 50s is kind of old. um, but I loved it so much, and I went like hardcore into choir. So I was in choir basically from grade school all the way through early college. I sang in madrigals, we did a cappella groups. I used to do, um, I would go around to various neighborhoods and do caroling for the Ronald McDonald House, so I'd collect donations. I did theater when I was in high school. And I'm pretty sure that if I hadn't gone into academia, there's a good chance, actually, I might have maybe become a drama teacher or done some acting, like stage acting, because I loved it. I did some stuff when I was in high school, but, like, you know, you don't, if you're not going to go to California, then it's less likely to happen that you're going to kind of make money doing it. Otherwise, it's sort of perceived more as like you do it because you love doing it. I just didn't think I'd actually go to school to become an actor. So if you think about needing to make money to feed yourself, then academia is a much more surefire way to be financially successful than acting, even though in hindsight that's clearly not the case. Oh dear. Oh my goodness. There's so many things that have been happening in the chat. Oh yeah, I probably would be able to write this into a mod for others to play, because I've actually drawn a lot of inspiration from my anthropology skills and education. So one of the things that I kind of love and hate about modern D&D is it draws a lot of inspiration from Tolkien. And I won't say anything bad about Tolkien because I know that he's been very influential with D&D and how we understand like elves and dwarves and those kinds of backgrounds. And it's also based a lot in texts from other countries. So yeah, I don't want to criticize anyone's history, right? But I think from the fantasy point of view, there definitely needs to be more role reversal with women, because the addition of Tauriel in The Hobbit was kind of controversial because she doesn't really exist in the books. So I think the decision to have her in there was a good one, because you need a strong female role model. And Tauriel, she's sort of like a paragon of strength. Like, you know, just I don't have time to like describe all the things that I feel about that character, but I just think D&D needs to have a different presentation of the same kind of information. So I don't like the fact that orcs are always perceived in one way, because it basically means that anyone who is brutish is stupid. Or the same thing with elves, like all elves are beautiful. There are video games that pose elves as kind of really almost alien in their culture. And so whenever I see these differences being played out, I'm immediately drawn into it, because it feels like it's something I need to explore, not something that I can just take for granted as, well, that's how it is in the world. So when I was designing my world, I wanted to sort of capitalize on these stereotypes and throw them on their head. It's been a difficult challenge, because that basically means I have to come up with all the races, all their back cultures, how they came to be the way that they are, how they're perceived with different other races, all that stuff. And I have to come up with the sessions, like what my players are investigating, or, you know, what the story hook is, dealing with whatever situations that may arise. So it feels real, right? So they have this immersive feeling whenever they're playing. So yeah, I end up thinking a lot about this kind of stuff and living in these worlds, and I think it would be worth adding what I've done with D&D into a more wider space like the internet. But we have to finish the campaign before I can sit down and write anything about it. So hopefully that was a fun little aside for you guys. Oh no. Oh goodness, Crystal, this is a fantastic story that I'm going to read. Before my daughter's very first D&D game, I was on roller skates and fell accidentally kicking and breaking a dragon statue outside my house. Her DM rewrote his story because I killed a dragon. That's amazing. Also, sorry that you fell while wearing roller skates and kicked a dragon statue. Actually, I have a dragon tattoo because I love them so much. Poor dragon. Oh my god. Ooh, releasing a new West Side Story. Gosh, when did the original come out? Because, I'm thinking 70s, but maybe that's not right. Where does Galadriel stack up? Well, I don't know the full history of Galadriel off the top of my head, but she was one of those early elves who settled ultimately in Lothlorien. I think, I mean, from a movie point of view, I think putting her face with Cate Blanchett was a really good idea because the woman is ageless. So when they decided to put her in The Hobbit, she looks exactly like she did 20 years ago. And obviously she's aged like the rest of us in the last 20 years. I think Galadriel is... I've talked about this with my partner because he also is familiar with the world of Tolkien, and he's read a lot of the lore too. Bought him a couple of the most recent 2 books that came out. There's The Fall of Gondolin and there was another one. Anyway, so in the origin of the world, you have sort of one of the female elves. She's married to a male elf. Gosh, this is going to go downhill really quickly because I can't remember any of their names. But suffice it to say, you basically have a female who's married to a male, and he goes off because he has a love of the sea and travel and adventure. So he leaves all the time, and she is sort of left behind. And I understand where a lot of this stuff comes from. She's unhappy. Her husband is constantly leaving, and she's tied to the land where he seems to be more tied to the sea. And so there's like that whole conflict presented between people who care for each other, but also who have very separate interests. And kind of like the melancholy that can come from that sort of relationship. But I feel like in this situation, the female isn't doing anything. Like she has no life outside of her connection with her husband, whereas her husband has connection with the wife, but also with this other interest of his. And to me, I feel like it's a very socio-historically placed attitude towards women, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I feel like with the retelling of various stories, it's important to find things that deal with our current attitudes towards situations, relationships, individuals, that sort of thing. So, for example, women today are they have different types of roles today than they did maybe 100 years ago, and the way that they are expressed and the voices that are doing those expressing, doing that expression, doing those I'm gonna get the English right here, give me a second. The way that they are presenting themselves comes from within rather than other people describing on their behalf. So it's kind of like with doctors and medicine. So there were a lot of male doctors focusing on male health. So there was a lot more information about men's health that was then sometimes just applied to women, even though women's bodies are very different. And so that sort of changes when you have more female doctors who are interested in female health. And so we know more about those differences because you have female doctors focusing on women's health. And then, moving forward, those individuals who are trans, for example, the more trans doctors you have, they're going to be focusing more on trans health and understanding the differences between these types of bodies so that we expand our knowledge using those perspectives rather than trying to speak from an outsider's point of view. And so part of the reason why I have issues with Tolkien's work has to do with the time in which he was establishing a lot of these stories and running the lore. It was like, 30s, 40s, 50s. And so I feel like, in part, by contributing my stories, because the way I think is fundamentally different than the way he might have thought, I'm also living, 100 years after him when he's done his writing versus when I'm doing my writing. And, I'm scholarly. I've got a lot of training in anthropology and archaeology and have studied some things that he has also studied. So, like, not to say that I'm a Tolkien 2.0, but just I would say that I wouldn't be far off the mark to say that I could do something similar for the world of fantasy so that it doesn't feel like we're just repeating a lot of those same tropes that get really old and boring after a while. Hopefully this ramble is making sense to everybody. Welcome to the world of my mind. Oh, goodness. You can probably hear her back there. The more emphatically I talk, the more she's concerned that there's something wrong with me. Dealing with dragons novels as a kid. I did not know that those novels existed. Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I have not read that, but I have seen, well, I haven't seen the movie, but I know that they made a movie. So West Side Story might have been in the late 50s. I went to an old bookshop. It was a converted barn, basically. and they had this huge selection of fantasy novels. People like writing stuff in the 70s and 80s that didn't really go mainstream, so these are probably some of the last surviving copies in print. And I sort of, well, when I read them, I kind of understood how the fantasy genre has been dominated by men, and how women are often used in fantasy novels to propel the plot story forward. And it annoys me to no end, because I feel like women have a purpose beyond just being the love interest. And to underscore this, we've been recently watching the original Star Trek, because it's on Netflix right now. And there are some moments where I'm just like, oh dear. They put on like the purple filter for the dramatic, dreamy effect. Because it signals to the audience, this is a beautiful woman who's probably going to have some kind of love interest aspect. Oh yeah. Someone was telling the story about it's like a first age story from Tolkien, where he talks about this relationship between a male and a female and his love of the sea. Apparently, I put a song in Chris's head. Okay, so I have heard that Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is an interesting book and movie. I've just never, like, whenever you sit down to watch a movie, you're just like, I don't know, what should we watch? I don't know. And then you spend the next 20 minutes looking for movies, and you pick out a bunch of things, and you're like, yeah, well, we don't actually have enough time to watch this, so let's just watch something else. What I should do is cultivate a list of movies to watch, and then, and I used to do this back when I first didn't have cable, watched a lot of movies. Just roll the dice, see what number it came up, and then we watched whatever that number movie was. So back in the day, Netflix had a watch later or save to watch list. And so we'd roll the dice, see what number it was in the queue, and then we could select that one to be sent the DVD, and then we'd watch that in a couple of days when it arrived in the mail. Layla has thrown off her collar because she's mad that I haven't opened the door. Oh, goodness. So I have made some progress on this yarn, and hopefully those of you watching have made some progress on your projects as well. I think we should do this again. So I've kind of had some fun just babbling on about D&D. And if you guys are up for it, I could arrange for next week. Do you think we should have a theme for this next session? Because that might be fun. I don't know. I'm kind of going with the flow here. I think last session was very academically oriented, because we were talking a lot about where to go to get free resources for research. And I can't remember who it was, but there was someone in the chat who was giving a lot of details about where to go to find certain bits of information, and kind of getting access to current research, because articles get produced faster than books. And so if you want to know what is happening in a field of research, usually conferences and articles are the best way to kind of get a feel for what is kind of developing. So that was a really good theme. I think that was the last session. Goodness, my brain is shot. Today has been the D&D session and learning a little bit about what I've done in the past. I struggle with my failures a moment. Oh, this is cool. Dealing with Dragons. It was written for young girls to be in an adventure story. So I guess the protagonist is a female and she doesn't want to be married off, so she goes and lives with away and has adventures with her dragon, which I can totally relate to. So it's kind of hard to see at this angle, but it's my dragon. With me at all times. I think when I was little, I was more obsessed with dinosaurs because I wanted to be a dinosaur digger, or actually a paleontologist. But ultimately I settled on archaeology because I was much more interested in that than I was in dealing with animals. So I read all those Dinotopia books, and I think I actually still have them in my collection with my mom. She basically holds on to all my stuff while I'm, globe-trotting. Oh, there's only 3 of these books in the series. Oh. Well, I'm glad that you kind of like this whole off the rails live stream, because sometimes coming up with like tutorials and all that stuff, I feel like, and I know I've mentioned this before, but I feel like I'm kind of pegged in because I'm trying to, stay on topic. But with the live streams, anything goes. We'll talk about everything. I have a lot to say. Good. So, I don't know. I think I probably still need to be working on this because this is only bobbin number 2 of this yarn, and we're coming up to March, which is really scary for me because I'm in the process of switching my visa over from my Tier 4 visa to a partner visa. So if I don't get this done in time, basically the UK government can kick me out of the country, and I just have to leave everything behind because there's no way I'm going to get all this on a plane, including my wheel. So yeah, I've been really distracted in the last couple of months because even though the guidance is posted on the website for the UK government, I don't always know what exactly they mean by certain stuff. So I've been just gathering documents, because if I don't actually get this visa done correctly the first time, I might actually ruin my chances of ever living in the UK. So if they reject my visa application and they don't allow me to repeal the decision, then I don't know, I might be suddenly leaving. I don't know. So I think just doing live streams might help keep my sanity. I don't know. I'll try to fit them in on a Sunday. The only reason why I had to do 4 o'clock today was because I often go later than just my 1 hour time slot. Like right now, I've gone almost 2 hours. I should probably get going so I can eat dinner. But I will probably schedule the live stream like I did for this session so that at least you can bookmark it, turn on some notifications so that you know it's coming up. But yeah, I might just need it because while I've submitted my application, I'll be allowed to stay on what's called 3C leave. So my visa will expire, but I'll be allowed to stay until the head office makes a decision. But as it is right now, it's like 60 working days generally before you hear anything. And so that's basically 3 months. So I'll basically have 3 months from March just waiting to see if I'm going to be allowed to stay in the UK, which I hope. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to pack up everything and go live with my mom in the States. Wouldn't that be fun? Hopefully everything will turn out okay. I have read The Dragon Riders of Pern. I am a huge Anne McCaffrey fan, and I read the books probably like in 2006. And then when I came here, I obviously left all my books behind. So I've gone to the charity shop, the local charity shop, and I bought them all again. So I think I've got about 15 of the books, including some of the ones that she wrote with her co-authors, and some of the ones, I think there's actually one she wrote with her son, maybe? Yeah. I'm not married to a UK citizen. I could, but it's sort of a big deal to do stuff like that because, well, I mean, it's 2022, and the notion that you have to be married to somebody in order to be given certain rights, especially considering that Illinois only gave the right to marry same-sex couples, I think it was 2011. It basically prevents people who want to be together from having the rights of married people, and if it's not equal, then you're basically saying that this archaic institution that is designed in this specific way only applies to the people who are going to be normal. And so it just, like, we've been dating for almost 6 years. We've been living together for over 5. And the UK government basically says, well, if you want to get married, you have to prove it. And there's a lot more hassle with doing that, which I wasn't prepared to do because I only finished submitting my PhD thesis in the end of December last year. And to assemble all my documentation and get enough hours at work so that I could, take care of myself and my bills. It's not an easy task. So with a partner visa, I don't get as many benefits. So like if anything happened to my partner, I would be forced to leave. They wouldn't even say, oh no, you could stay. They would be like, okay, well, if anything happens to him, you have to leave. If I was married, that would not be the case. But I hate that situation, and I haven't been in a good position to deal with that because I've only just finished my PhD, which is why I was here in the first place. So, yeah, some things would be easier right now if that were the case. Other things, maybe not so much. I have known a lot of my colleagues. They have chosen to get married just because getting a job in the UK right now is insanely hard for all recent graduates. So my situation isn't alone, but I struggled for 5.5 months trying to find a job in archaeology, doing anything, even entry level stuff, even though I have loads of experience, volunteer, paid work, education, and I still don't qualify for an entry level position, which doesn't require any experience or education. It's really maddening. But I'm hoping with having the visa, so I don't have the same hour restriction that I currently have, I'll be in a better position. But yeah, it's tough because I want to stay here. I love being in the UK, but at the same time, they're not making it easy to want to stay. Yeah. My mom would love to have me come and stay, but I don't know if she would want me to live with her. I'm very independent and I like doing things my way. Although she would probably love my cats, especially Layla. Oh, goodness. But if you've ever been to the UK and you've seen in photos or whatever how beautiful it can be here, I don't want to give it up. And so if it means going through this extremely nerve-wracking situation in order to stay, then I'm willing to do it. I also don't want to leave my family, because that's what I would have to do. I'd have to leave, like, my 2 cats. They would just stay behind. My partner would stay here, probably. So, yeah, don't want to think about it too much. That's why I've been really pressed for time, just trying to get these next tutorials and other videos out on a timely schedule. But I'm working on it. I like doing it, so don't feel like this is me complaining at all, because I would do it, and I have done it when I was in Korea. I worked 45 hours a week teaching, and I had about 20 or 30 more hours outside of teaching, just like grading and coming up with lesson plans. So I probably worked close to 70 hours a week when I first started doing YouTube tutorials. So I like it. Anyway, so I'm going to close out the stream here, just because I'm starting to get hungry and I still have to prepare for our session in a couple of hours. And if you guys are interested in my D&D stuff, I might actually put some of that stuff on my Patreon, because I don't know, I feel like because Patreon is a little bit anything goes about me and what I'm doing, I don't know, we'll see where I put that. But otherwise, I hope you guys have a really good week, and I will let you know about the next live stream. I will schedule that on the channel and probably do some socials to let you guys know that it's there. So I hope you had a good time doing some crafts, made some headway on your project. I made 2 little bumps here on my yarn. I feel better having done this because my guild met yesterday and I had to work all day, so obviously I couldn't go. Yeah, so I look forward to seeing you in the next one, and I hope you enjoyed this very rambling live stream video. Thanks for watching, you guys. Bye!